Welcome to the third storytelling, sacred storytelling. We are so glad that you are joining with us today with these amazing storytellers and who will be sharing such wonderful tales. Just a reminder, sacred means different things to different people. And so we'll have stories that you may think are sacred or may think less than sacred, but to the people telling them, they have special meaning. And all of us can learn, as Jim has taught me, Jim Brule, that often the sacred and the profane walk hand in hand, and that is a thing that we can learn from each other. And so I hope that you will enjoy today. And we're going to go ahead and get started with our very first person, Milbre Burch. Milbre is my friend. She is a mentor to my life, and the story that she's going to do is one of the absolute best. Milbre Burch.
Thank you. I'm going to share today an original character monologue called Meeting Martin. It was commissioned by the St. Martin's Church in Providence, Rhode Island in about 1987. The assistant rector reached out to me and asked me if I could prepare a telling of the story of St. Martin of Tours for his feast day on November 11th. But first he had to school me in all things St. Martin. So he gave me some books to read, and that's how I discovered that Martin was born in the 4th century to pagan parents, but that he was very early attracted to this new practice of Christianity. He was baptized and became quite a famous evangelist who had a special ministry with the mentally ill population of his time. It was said that he was so popular among his fellow Christians that they asked him to be their bishop, and he refused. So they kidnapped him, and they took him to the bishop's mansion, where first he refused to sleep in the bed, then in the bedroom, then in the house at all, and finally everyone agreed that he could conduct his bishoply duties from a more reclusive retreat, and so we have St. Martin in the Fields. The most famous story about St. Martin was told during the time that he was a young soldier. His father had been career army, and he arranged for his son's enlistment. But at that time, your standard hitch was about 25 years, so it took Martin quite a bit of time to get back on track. In the story, it is said that Martin gazed upon a naked beggar, and he cut his own cloak in two that he might clothe that beggar in whom he saw the Christ. Now, this is a modern day retelling of that story. It's set in Providence, Rhode Island. It's a winter story. It's a saint story. It's a story about the miracle of small human kindnesses. And it's told by one of the invisible people. I first came to Providence in November, a few years ago. I came up on the bus after I got out of the hospital. They must have decided I was well enough to check out because they told me I should go and stay with my brother. Nobody asked me what I wanted to do. My brother had sent me a ticket to ride the bus. That was generous of him. He had moved to Maine with his wife, and she was expecting a baby in February. I knew from other times of being with them that she was like afraid of me, so I wasn't looking forward to going and being with them. But my brother kept saying, just come for a visit, so I did. The bus pulled into the Providence station about 10:45 at night. The roads had started getting slippery in Connecticut when the rain had turned to sleet. The bus driver said into the microphone, Providence, next stop, Providence, and I like the sound of that, because Providence means God. He said we'd be there for a few minutes, so I got off the bus to use the bathroom. I don't like those little toilets on the buses. When I came out of the John, the sleet was coming down really hot outside, and I felt warm and dry right where I was. I didn't know that they closed the bus station at 11. In New York, the bus station stays open all night long. I know because in winter I'd spent a lot of time there. I heard them call my bus, and I just didn't want to go. I guess I was afraid that in Maine I'd have to live somebody else's life instead of my own, so I let the bus go without me. And then I realized that it took my big suitcase, and that made me feel really bad, like I couldn't take care of my own stuff. all I had was this old shopping bag from Bloomingdale's. I went to the ticket office and I asked if I could get a refund for the rest of my ticket, but they said it takes 2 weeks and they mail you a check, so I kept it. When they closed the station, I just started walking. I went to the square in front of City Hall, but there wasn't too much open downtown. I guess in Godstown, everybody goes to bed early, but I didn't have a bed. I stood in a covered doorway at the City Hall till I was too cold to stand still anymore, and I started back towards the bus station when I saw these big open doors with steam coming out. It was the garage where the trucks go to deliver the newspapers. So I stayed right there until I was warm again. Then I walked on up the street past the Civic Center and the hotel. When I got to the bridge over the highway, I could see in the distance there was a YMCA, so I started towards that. But my feet were really cold because the sleet was coming down so hard and my shopping bag got soggy. When the handles came off, I tried to keep the whole thing under my jacket, but then the bottom fell out and my stuff fell down into the street. When you don't have a home, your stuff is very important to you. So I bent down to pick up my stuff and this really beat up car goes by and splashes slush all over me. And I felt terrible. But the driver of the car, he stopped. He got out. It was a young man. He was wearing these garbage bags over his coat to keep from getting wet. So he looked really fat and puffy like the Michelin tire man on the signs. And he came up and apologized to me. And then he bent over and started helping me pick up my stuff. He saw that I was shivering and he asked if he could take me someplace, but I said I didn't have any place to go here. So he said he was out that night delivering newspapers all night. If I wanted to, I could ride around with him in his car. Now, usually I am suspicious of strangers, but then I remembered I was in Godstown, and I said yes. We drove all over South Providence together. He told me to put my stuff down under the heater, and it got dry in no time. And he showed me how he rolled up the newspapers and put them into plastic bags. And when he got out to deliver newspapers to the apartment complex, I put several of the newspapers into plastic bags myself. This guy had full paper routes, 2 in the morning and 2 at night to help pay for school. He said that he lived with his parents, and it was his old man's car he drove when the weather was bad. I could tell from the way he talked that sometimes it was hard for him and his parents. His old man wanted him to join the army, but this guy, he said he wanted to be a priest. And I said I thought he'd make a good priest. And since he lived in Godstown, it was a good sign. And he smiled at me. Then he asked me what I was going to do, and I said I didn't know. He said maybe I should just go and see my brother. If I didn't like it, I could leave. And that's when I told him I only had a one-way ticket. So he said maybe I'd like it. I told him that I was afraid I would be a burden to my brother, and that's why I didn't want to go. But he said I'd helped him a lot that night with the newspapers, and my brother and I would find something I could do in Maine, and that made me feel better. So I asked him to take me back to the bus station. He said it wasn't open for another half an hour, but he took me through the drive-thru at the Dunkin' Donuts and he bought me a cup of coffee. We pulled up to the station just as they were unlocking the doors. He gave me some of his plastic bags for me to put my stuff in, and then he gave me one of his garbage bags to put on. So now I look fat and puffy like the Michelin tire man, but I didn't care. I asked him what his name was, and he told me. I got out of the car as they opened the door to the bus station, but I stood on the sidewalk and I watched him drive his old man's car up the street. When I went inside the station, I found out that the next bus left for Maine at 9. So at 8:30, I called my brother. And he was pretty upset with me. But after he calmed down, I told him how I felt. And I think he understood. Things have gone very well for me since I went to stay with my brother. His wife and I have gotten to know each other better, so now we're not afraid anymore. And my niece, she's 5 years old, and she's used to me. And my brother and I, we work together to help me save my money. And every once in a while, we plan a trip just for me. So this year, I'm going back to Providence in November. because I never forgot that town named God, or that guy I met named Martin. Thank you.
It is one of my favorite stories, Milbre, and it doesn't lose its power in the kindness. And the MC is supposed to hold it all together. The MC is not doing good, but it's such beauty. And if we could all take a moment to see the invisible right now, it would be so important. And you just make that story come alive. You're getting lots of statements over there. It's a wonderful story, remarkable telling. And since I have just a couple minutes more, you embody this character who I don't think you give a name, if I'm correct. That's right. And you embody him so well. What did you do to practice being this person who you so completely become?
Oh my gosh, that's a wonderful question, because the answer is so wondrous on its own. You know, every storyteller has to find her or his own doorway into a story. And I was having trouble finding my doorway into the legend of St. Martin of Tours. But I had about a week left in the time before the feast day celebration. And it snowed one night. And my car was stuck in my driveway with quite a bit of snow that I couldn't get out. And I had to go to a meeting at the church. So I went down and I stood at the bus stop and I got a bus, which took me downtown through the middle of downtown Providence, where all of the buses exchanged, where I got to see the vulnerable people of our city walking about in the cold weather with garbage bags tied over their shoes. Something I hadn't had to know before, because it wasn't the experience I was living. I went to my meeting and I came back. I was frozen to my core. I was never more grateful in my life to have housing than that day. I went up to my apartment and I was still cold, so I ran a hot bath and I climbed into it. And this narrator came to me and started speaking out loud. And I said, whoa, wait a minute. And I jumped back out of the tub and I wrapped myself in a towel and I ran for my computer and I turned it on and I waited for it to heat up. And then I typed as the character spoke. I have never had a story come to me through grace before, but I will always be grateful that it did.
Amen.